Hello, welcome to No Better Time. I'm Phil Salter, and I'm actually here today with Brian Schermerhorn. He's a software engineer at Better.com currently and former Facebook uh, senior developer, correct? At Facebook previously?
Yeah, I was a software engineer at Facebook. Yeah.
Excellent. And I've kind of been connected with you on LinkedIn for a while now, and I don't know how far that goes back. I probably saw you were a software engineer, something I was trying to be and I'm doing now, and kind of connected with you. But something I've always noticed about you as I followed you on LinkedIn, I've kind of seen your posts. You're someone who really engages with people, and uh, kind of I see you as probably someone who's a mentor to people, and I see you kind of giving real honest feedback. And it's not always like, "Hey, everything's great." You'll tell people if you think they're wrong or need to do better. It seems like, am I right on that? Kind of say it like it is, kind of.
Yeah, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You can give someone some advice that makes them feel good and then waste a
Hmm.
bunch of their time and resources, or you can just course correct them early on. I kind of look at it like if a pilot's slightly off course, maybe correct them early on and then they'll get to their destination sooner, right?
Yeah, and obviously that's way more useful, and I'm sure people take it different ways. I've been in different places in my life when you're not self assured, you get correction. You can kind of be very defensive, and I don't like being in that place. Have you found people kind of responding differently? I'm sure.
Um, you know, yeah, I mean, I've seen it both ways. Like, part of the problem is the some of the boot camps.
Hmm.
They want, especially before the income sharing agreements. I've been seeing some controversy for income sharing agreements being shady. So maybe they're not actually that great. But I know that back when you would charge people upfront for money, I mean, it's really about just getting butts in seats.
Hmm.
Um, and then they'll say whatever they need to say to get a butt in a seat. In fact, there was actually a point in time where I wanted to start a code school with a friend of mine, Trevor, and we were both just passionate about teaching people, and we were kind of tired of, we were interviewing people that were coming out of like local boot camps that were just not ready, and they just didn't know like the most basic stuff, and we were like, we want to solve this problem, and I would try to give some advice to these people, just, they'd be interviewing, and I'd be like, look, man, like this is your final project. Like, this was the final project that the school told you was good, and they'd be like, yeah, I think it's great, and I'm like, well, that's nice, you think it's great, but it actually matters more whether I think it's great. And I didn't say that arrogantly, but like, I'm
Hmm.
not the only company you're going to be interviewing with, right? It's going to be a bunch of people, presumably. Like, hopefully you didn't bank this all on just this one company that you're interviewing with. This was
Yeah.
before Facebook. And some people got like pretty defensive. Like, well, I know my skills, I know where it's at, and I believe it's fine. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not sure how far you'll go with that level of humility and willingness to take feedback, but good luck. And then I saw them, and they didn't look like they were, you know, going where they thought they were going to go. And so yeah, pretty much I just love giving people legit feedback. I love getting legit feedback myself. Sometimes it hurts, but it's always
Hmm.
led me to a better position.
Yeah, and it feels better when you're in that right place mentally to accept it and take it and do something with it, and you feel better. You don't feel. I don't think many people or anyone feels good when they recognize I'm being defensive and I'm not listening and I'm like scrambling to justify, what I've done or what my position or whatever. So you found yourself interviewing people for software engineering positions at different companies. It sounds like, and that's where you kind of come across these situations.
Well, I'd say when I was working at Jolt, that is probably the first time because we were talking to a lot of people from boot camps there, and so that
Hmm.
was more likely where it would come from. Um, but advice, like what advice to reject and what advice to take is a tricky thing. I mean,
Mm.
because it really is. Like, there is advice that you do not want to take. Like, I remember when I first joined Hack Reactor, and I was pretty confident that it was a good thing. Like it looked like the most rigorous course at the time. I saw the student projects that came out of it. They looked pretty dope. And I had a guy who was like a senior engineer who had worked at Microsoft and was working at some other company. And, that sounds like a guy you'd want to take advice from. And he told
Mm-hmm.
me like, oh yeah, you have to get a CS degree. Like it is absolutely essential. And, and then I had another friend of mine who was towards the end of his CS degree. Oh yeah, these jokers coming out of code camps, right? So those are the mentors I'm getting advice from.
So
And
if we go back, you're saying that's what you did then? Like you were looking to become a software engineer at this time, right? And you were looking at a potential like school or boot camp. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, this was like
Okay.
I don't know how long ago, like
Okay.
7 something years ago. Like
Okay.
yeah, back when I was looking to get into it, I was originally trying to go through YouTube tutorials and self learn. And back then, the resources were just kind of terrible. They were just either really basic or just way too advanced, is what it felt like. And then
Mm.
uh, a code camp seemed like a better ramp. And my point was that like that was the advice I was getting from people
Mm-hmm.
who were basically telling me not to do this, and then I did it anyway. Um, and then it worked out, and then they've been completely surprised by the results of it. In fact, the friend who was actually in school still said, "Yeah, I think I just didn't like the fact that you were taking a path that was going to make me feel like my 4 years were a waste." You
uh,
know, and then I imagine it's kind of like that with the other guy who's like, "Hey, I did this. You pay your dues too." Like it. Sometimes it's like
yes.
not. I don't even know if it's about true advice. It's just like what they did, and then
Yeah.
maybe there's a little bit of ego where they're like, well, if I paid my dues, then I want you to pay your dues or something.
Yeah, that's an
And
interesting point. And it's
yeah.
not necessarily even conscious, maybe, right? Maybe they think this
Hmm.
is solid advice, but they have this kind of bias or ego that they may not be aware of. But it's funny because in a different episode, I was talking about something very similar. Like you need to be, it's good to take advice and look to people with more experience to turn to them and say, "Hey, I want to learn. I want to kind of be where you're at. What got you there?" That's something reason why I reached out to you because I see you as someone who's very experienced, and that's just my impression of you. And your confidence level is high, and I think that's awesome. And I think that makes me believe, hey, there's something behind that. It's not just someone with, blank confidence just because they believe in themselves. Like I feel like you really can back it up by what I've seen you post and articles you've written and things like that. But something I thought about is, yeah, you have to be careful who you take advice from because someone might say something that's not really for you. And something for me that I struggled with, and I still struggle with, is like I really like having validation, and that can be a huge
Hmm.
crutch. You know what I mean? I want to hear good things about myself. I like that attention, and it's like having to come to terms with that. And if I had a friend who was a developer, a software engineer, and he's the one that kind of said, "Hey, you should do this." I did a boot camp as well, and that's what got me kind of in because I went to college. I actually got a 4 year degree, not it was a CS related degree, but it wasn't in software engineering because at the
Hmm.
time I thought that's not for me. I'm not smart enough. I'm not technical enough. I had this lack of belief. I had to like learn that I can do complicated things and take those challenges head on. But he almost told me like, hey, you should just go for it. And it was like getting the permission is what I needed at the time. It's unfortunate that I needed that, but I'm glad I got it because that's what I needed. You know what I mean? But I'm really impressed that you had people saying that knew what they were doing in theory, saying, don't do that. But you said, no, I feel like this is my path, and you did it. Where'd that come from?
Laziness. I didn't want to spend 4 years to do something that
Mm,
like I was at. It's kind of a joke, but
yeah.
I I was actually in college. I was going to Utah Valley University. I was actually doing CS classes like towards the beginning of it, and to me, I was always just impressed with like looking at an app that did something. Like just
Hmm.
at any app, just seeing press buttons and see it do stuff. I just thought that was really cool, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to like
Yeah.
make stuff that I see. And in the beginning computer science classes, you're not doing any of that. You're doing like some C++ or maybe some C sharp or some like you know like I don't know. You're learning about like very very low level things, and it didn't feel at
Hmm.
all like I asked one of my friends like, when am I going to learn how to build something that is like when does it click? I think I asked one of my friends. It's like, oh, when you're taking data structures and algorithms. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like that would make what I want to click. And then I saw
Uh-huh.
from Hackeria, and then I started talking to all the code camps. And my question was always, let me see your final student projects, right? Like, what's the culmination of going through your thing? And then I looked at like at the time, hack reactors, they've been like sold off to I think Galvanize or something. So I do not vouch for their curriculum anymore necessarily. But like back then, they had just like these awesome projects, and I was like, yes, that's what I want. Like it felt like something clicked where I was like, that's the stuff I want to be able to build. Like seeing those things and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it kind of felt like I was already trying the 4 year path. I would have been willing to do the work if that's what it took, but I didn't feel like I was getting satisfactory answers from those people about like when I would arrive to be able to build those things.
Yeah.
And then I saw these other people building these other cool things, and I'm like, and then I mean, I validated it. I was very skeptical. Like I looked around tons of places for reviews about it, and I mean, they said that they had like a, average student, 100,000. I mean, they had a lot of reviews and a lot of data behind it. And I was like, do I listen to these two people
Mm-hmm.
or do I listen to all these people and seeing the student projects? And it just felt, uh, it just, to me, it felt like it made sense. And so
Yes,
I
it
went
wasn't
for it.
just a blind stab in the dark. You were looking at data and you're looking at information, and I'm sure you listened to what they said, and that was in your mind. I'm sure, but then you said, "Let me see the other side of this, and let me make my choice."
I mean,
Um,
they were kind of the only code camp that really like that I was willing to like. I really wanted to make sure I picked the hardest and the most rigorous one because to me, it was actually a pretty big gamble
mm,
to go all in on that. Like I just scrounged up money from every possible thing. Like I took out a credit card from American Express that had 0% interest for a year, and I was like, well, I'm just a thousand's going on that thing.
mm-hmm,
I borrowed like a couple grand from my brother. Just I tried to go to a bank to get like a signature loan, and I didn't own anything that was worth collateral enough to, like, I just scrounged up money, and and then they let you defer half of it, whether or not you get a job. You have to pay it back in 6 months after the program, and so I really just
mm,
went all in, and I just like had to make it work. I picked the hardest one, and that may have helped, like the fact that
yeah.
it put myself in a corner like that.
That's interesting. I mean, because that's a big theme in my podcast here is just taking risks, whether it be around like investments or finances. But originally I thought this is really going to be more about finances because I want to learn more about investing and growing wealth. But it's really become more about just like taking risks in your career and doing things that you're afraid of doing, whether it be a new skill or any kind of goal. And you took a big risk. And for you, kind of having those high stakes is what made you say, I got to take this seriously. This isn't just for fun. You'd already decided, it seems like, I'm going to be a software engineer. Now, what's my best path, right? You'd already made that decision. It wasn't like, hey, maybe I'll be a software engineer. Let's see how this is.
Well, I mean, like I kind of had a very zigzaggy college experience where I had no idea. Like I was trying to find what I wanted to do. Like originally, I was interested in like foreign languages, and I thought like, oh, I'm a people person. I'm this abstract people person. Like maybe I'll do international business. That sounds like it's a good mix. And then I was talking to people who were getting business degrees, and they were like working as a bank teller, and they're like, well, the best job I can get is the one I have with this business degree. And I'm like,
Mm,
okay, well, this sucks. Like, this doesn't sound worth it. And um, I tried other avenues, and it just felt like things were not great. And the software engineering one really made sense. I did try the 4 year thing, and it just, or I was starting to go down it, and it just didn't feel like it was really lining up with what I wanted, and it was going to take a
yeah.
lot more time. I was already in like a lot of student debt, and it did. It felt like a really big risk going into it, but it also felt like this sort of, in these like in these action movies, they're like the only way out is in or something like that. Like I
Yeah.
really related to that, where I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, this seems like a legit thing. there's a lot of data backing it. The only way out is in. Like I have to double down
Mm,
on this to get out. And I was able to pay off my student loans. I mean, I was able to pay off everything very quickly after that. I mean, I was just imagining myself like finishing college and getting some business degree or something, and just making $10 an hour, and just already having all these student loans, and I'm like, I'm just going to be suffocating. And
yeah.
so that didn't feel good, and so I kind of
Yeah.
felt like, okay, there's this data backed path. I'm going to have to take out a bunch of loans, but like, let's roll the dice. I mean, I was even willing at the time when I was first looking at Hack Reactor's thing. It was actually even a little more potentially dire in the sense that like they only had an on-site course in San Francisco, and we were living in Utah in a basement apartment, and we had an infant, and like I mean we're barely living off anything, and like I'm like, okay, honey, so I'm thinking of going to San Francisco to live there for a 3 month course. I'm gonna live out of the car because there's no way in
Wow.
heck that I can pay San Francisco rent off of even off of loans, because like I had to also take out loans just for like living while I'm not working, right, for the three
Yeah.
months or whatever.
So it's like a full time thing. It wasn't like, hey, I had two
Oh, it
nights a
was
week in the evenings.
it was 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Wow. But
Yeah.
fully
So and
immersive, I'm sure there's some value, a lot of value to that.
to what?
Just being fully immersed in it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's good. So I was willing to do that. Like that's how much I wanted it. I was like, I will do whatever it takes. And she's like, I don't know, but I'm not gonna feel safe. And I'm like, let's try to be creative here, please, because this feels like the only path to make it. And like very luckily, I guess, um, I was just kind of browsing on their site because I was just constantly checking it, just like looking at it, like marveling at this thing in the store, kind of a thing. And then I saw they had like a remote program that was in a beta version, and I was like, remote, and then I was really skeptical it was going to be the same or not, because I had done online. Everyone's done like online college classes, and they're like,
Hmm.
this is not. It doesn't feel the same. So I
Yeah.
was pretty skeptical at first, but they were convinced that it would be the same thing, and I was like, okay, my wife will back this one, and I'm just gonna give it my all. So like I would have. I'm convinced I would have gone to San Francisco and lived out of a car, because I had a gym membership to 24-hour fitness, and they had one nearby. Like I did the logistics. I was like figuring
Yeah.
out where I would park the car. I would shower at the gym. Um, but like she would have been by herself, and she wasn't gonna let it fly. So luckily the remote beta one kind of lined up,
Mm.
and then I was able to do that. And then our apartment flooded twice for a total of 2 months while I was in the program. So that was also fun. My grandparents luckily lived nearby, and they let us like live there for a bit, but it was
Wow.
crazy.
I imagine if you would have been gone when that happened, it would have been like, I told you should have left.
Yeah,
But
I would have heard it. I would have
no,
heard it.
I believe that you would have done it because you were that ready to go. You were dedicated. Um, that's I think that's like I said, that's really impressive to me to take those risks. And obviously, you didn't do that before you did homework and you made a decision. And obviously, this applies to any part of our lives. Like at a certain point, you have to actually pull the trigger, get started, and that's when like the work really begins, right? It's not like, oh, now I started, now it's all downhill. That's when you really had to. That's when it was like 3 months of hell, I'll bet, in a lot of ways, because it was just so much hard work and not much sleep is my guess, but
Oh, I was up later. I mean, I was up past. I was frequently. I mean, even though the course was 9 to 9, I was frequently up later, and I was frequently
yeah,
up on earlier, just because like I had to make it work. Like I put unintentionally. It's not like I wished to be in debt more for
yeah,
this. Like it just sort of happened that like I had to make it work or be in a ton of debt, and there was just that drive. Like, I mean, I would stay up, review everything we went over the day. Like, if we did a project during the day, I would redo it by myself after the
wow,
course just to like refresh it. Because you could do it much faster the second time because you kind of had
yeah,
figured the things out. So it was kind of just going through the motions. So it wasn't like doing double the work, but like frequently would stay up after. I mean, it's not like a healthy pattern, to do long term. But I look back fondly on the experience as like I kind of gained a confidence in myself that like, oh, I can work pretty dang hard if I need to. Like I
Yeah.
didn't really believe that of myself before, you know. So it was kind of nice in that sense, but I mean, I'm definitely not doing that pattern now, but it was
Yeah.
necessary at the time.
For short periods of time, if we have like, it's good to have these kind of lofty short term goals where we say, hey, we need to do something extra for a period of time. But yeah, I agree. Like, it's not necessarily sustainable for years and years. But that's awesome that it paid off for you. Um, I guess during this whole process of like getting different jobs, and have you found that there were mentors that really helped you? And did you find it helpful what those other, I guess, mentors said and did along the way, even if it was opposite of what you decided to do? Like, did you? I guess, what kind of mentors have you had, and have you been able to mentor others? I guess.
Yeah, this again is it's like hard to know who to listen to.
Yeah.
I think that I did get more consistently good advice though, like after I got into it. I feel like the most important thing is to just first seek out like smart people. Like
Mm,
you will get like if you can find smart people that you just like respect, the kind of person where you're like, man, I learn when I'm around this person.
yes.
Like, him, her, or whatever. Like I learn it. Those are the people that you want to like be around. Um, and I'm trying to remember your exact question here. I'm
Oh,
probably
I
getting
guess
off
it
on a
was a really
tangent.
terrible question. I was just like, did you? What mentors did you have, and like, did you mentor other people? But something that you said, though, by the way, just really smart people, because I work with incredibly smart people, and it's such a wonderful thing because you learn from them. But I think something that's super important is to be able to have trust with these people, to be able to turn to them and say, "Hey, I don't understand this," or I don't get this. Because like, if you're too scared to admit you don't know something, then you're just gonna stay in ignorance. I don't know if you found that as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I mean, that's just part of being an engineer is constantly acknowledging when you're dumb. Like
Yeah.
you're always dumb. You're always gonna have to do new stuff. Um, yeah.
And having that thought, like, I should already know this. I can't act. Like, yeah, I have to push that away sometimes. Like, whether or not I should know this, I don't know this, and I need some help. That's just the reality, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say is that I think through about mentors that I've had is like, I mean, it's now that I'm kind of on the end of some people will ask me for stuff and I'll ask people for stuff. Like, it's helpful to think through, and it's hard to not kind of, I guess you can't know it unless you've done it. As I've gotten older, I've realized so much of life is just about like being in someone's shoes and then you really understand something. Like,
Mm,
being someone who's a mentor to something like it's not the most selfless thing in the world actually because there is sort of like there are things about it that give you joy and there are things about it where you're like, okay, well, I don't want to mentor this person. The things that give you
mm.
joy are, and this helps you to be a better mentee and to ask
Yes.
for mentorship. The things that give a mentor joy of being a mentor is like there's a satisfaction in feeling like you had a part in someone's success, right? Seeing someone go off and grow and getting like a piece of the credit for it. I mean, you're not getting real like financial credit, but just like seeing someone grow. I imagine it's similar to like, I don't know, seeing kids grow or something.
Mm,
Um, but just seeing them go off and succeed and then to get gratitude from them, and usually the effort to give them help is usually like really low, but the benefit they get from it is usually like highly leveraged because like it's, I don't know, insightful, and then it really helped them make a decision or something. Like
yeah.
they're usually really grateful too, the good mentees anyway.
Mm,
And it just kind of feels nice for someone to follow your advice as well. Like all of these things kind of play into it. Like if you can feel all those things from a mentee, then you will keep giving them help. The
hmm.
people that suck as mentees are the people that you give them advice and then they don't follow it. And then it's kind of annoying because it feels like, well, why did I even put all this work into telling you? You went off and just didn't do it.
Yeah.
I've been a mentee who's been like that, actually. partly how I know that it originally would piss people off. And then I've had mentees do it to me where it would frustrate me. And I'm like, you asked me my advice, and then I told you how terrible of a thing it would be, and then you're still doing it. Like, it just makes you feel like, why do I even bother? And then
Yeah.
having someone be grateful, and then also having someone be very like proactive and respectful of your time and assertive. Like, it may seem to the inexperienced mentee that it's nicer to just be like, hey, I want to respect your time. Like, how long should it be? Just be like straight up like, hey, I'd love 10 minutes of your time to talk about
Yeah.
this. Like, the less you can make me think and the easier it is that I just say okay and all details are figured out by you, like I am more likely to say okay. Like you actually did this when you asked me to do this. You were like, "Hey, it would take this long. It would be
Yeah.
about this." All I had to do was like, "Sure, okay," and that was, kind of all I needed to do.
You're learning there that when you go to somebody, being prepared is really important. Because if someone comes to you with a problem, let's say with software engineering or otherwise, and they are just like, here's a blank canvas, I don't know what to do. But they say, hey, I've gone down
Yeah,
path A, B, and C. I feel like this might be something, but I'm stuck here. They can kind of walk you through this, have a more specific question than just like, it's not working. You know what I mean? I'm sure that helps too.
yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, I mean, like when I was at Facebook, I would have people say like, "Hey, what's it like at Facebook?" They would just message me that, and I'm like, "Dude, I don't. You're gonna make me send you back like, what do you mean?" Or like, it's just not like I actually think of it like UX, right? Like when you're building products for users, you're always thinking about like how do I make it the best experience for them? It's like how do you make this communication the best experience for me? Like
Mm-hmm.
how can you make it so I don't have to think more? If you can think of the thing like a specific question, then please do it. Otherwise, I'm going to be over here thinking, okay, well, what's he most likely going to want to know? But maybe I'm not even going to get it right, and then I just wasted everyone's time. Like, it's just, yeah, don't make me think. Think of
Yeah.
it like UX and do that with mentors. Be specific. And if you're not going to follow their advice, I would say explain why.
Yeah.
And a couple things may happen. Like they may go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Or, oh, I didn't understand that you had that situation. But what happens is they won't end up feeling like, dude, this guy asked for advice and then doesn't even do it. Like it feels like a time waste, and it feels somewhat
Yeah.
like it feels a little bit slap in the facey. But if you kind of be upfront about like maybe why you don't follow it, then they won't get that. And one of the things I learned at Facebook, where they have a culture of it's called fast feedback, and they believe in like being very open and like giving feedback quickly. And when I first like learned about this, I was kind of like a hyper feedback giver where I would give people feedback all the time, like constructive feedback. And people would say thank you. Like everyone was very welcoming of it. But I realized that like there is a point at which you feel drained from feedback. Like it does come with a cost. No matter how accurate the feedback is and how much the person could benefit from it, there is like a sort of absolute, at least a minimum absolute cost. And you have to really like do the calculations, which I don't even know if you can do, but there's a calculation that needs to go into like, is it worth giving this feedback, even if it's true, even if it would benefit the person? Like, is it a really big thing? Is it like a high priority? Is this person doing damage unless I give this constructive feedback? I've toned down a lot how much feedback I give, and I kind of weigh like, is it worth this? Because it's going to ding the relationship a little bit. Like, we're human,
Yeah.
Objectively, we're at work, and we say, "Oh, of course I want feedback. Of course I want to be better." But like, it does hurt you a little bit, even if it's true. So now every time I have feedback to give someone, I'm like, do I really want to give this? Is it really worth it? Like, is it really going to benefit them?
It's a good question to ask, I think, because I think you're right. I'm sure there's times where I've done things at work where it's like, well, yeah, obviously that's not ideal, but if everyone was always pointing out everything you did wrong, you'd be very like self conscious and like cautious about what you're doing. It could get in the way, And also, I think a good question to ask yourself is like you're saying here is why am I giving this feedback? Is it to make myself feel better? Is it really to help them? And if it's really going to help them, what would be the result of me telling them this? Would they actually be better off? Right. Um,
There's there's also a question of like how often are you giving this person feedback
mm,
constructively? Because there's a point where like if you keep getting it too consistently, constructive feedback, like just bam, 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 you're just getting constructive feedback all the time. You eventually start to feel like paralyzed. You eventually start to feel like I can't trust myself to make a decision,
hmm.
you know? Like I'm just doing everything wrong. And
Yeah.
uh I remember I remember a manager that I respect, um, a fellow team member. I gave feedback to him about this team member. I was like, "Hey, I saw this thing. Like, do you want to call this out?" Right? Very open feedback culture. And he goes, "No, I don't. What this person did is not perfect, and normally it would be good to give this person feedback, but it's more important that they just have confidence and execute." And it kind of opened my eyes, and it's like, not all truth needs to always be spoken. Like sometimes there's sort of like a greater good that you're aiming for. Of like sometimes it's
Hmm.
better for the person to have confidence because they'll kind of push through, and it's better that they did the thing. It's better that they moved in the right direction than that they do it perfectly. Especially in today's culture of like everyone having an opinion on social media. Like, if you make a post and it's like 95% correct,
Yeah.
that the people are going to be chiming in about that 5%, no matter how much benefit the 95% of the post just gave. Oh, you missed this one thing, and it's like I didn't
Yes.
see you post about this. I didn't see you benefit people with this. Like, you know, some of the articles I write where I'm like, hey man, like I didn't have to write this.
Yeah.
Sure, it's not perfect, but no one, I'm not even getting a benefit to write this. Like, go ahead and nitpick it, but how about you go write one instead of just
Yeah.
nitpicking mine? Like, uh, so feedback's interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You think there's also a risk of if someone is constantly getting feedback on everything, that then they might
Oh
even
yeah.
not, they won't have their own compass as to what is good and bad anymore because they're waiting for someone to tell them maybe. Is that, you think there's a risk of that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer in a lot of situations to learn the hard way. I actually prefer to like do the wrong thing and mess up, feel the pain of it, and I like the pain. I'm not a masochist, but I like the pain to be sort of the teacher. I mean, I've been trying to like teach my kids in the same way of like letting them learn lessons, like thinking like, okay, how bad is this if they mess up? Well,
Yes.
not too bad. Like my kid, he'll like have like a cup filled up to the very top. So it's gonna spill if he carries it
Yes.
somewhere. So I go, okay, your job is to get that to the table. Any mess you clean up. So if he can figure out a way to carry it from one spot to the other without making a mess, I guess I just learned a trick. But another like a maybe more controlling parent might be like, "Oh, go empty that out a little bit." It's like, no, let him or her like just figure it out. Like
Mm-hmm.
I kind of look at kids as like and people as and myself as like a machine learning algorithm where we learn from past experiences, and you have
Mm-hmm.
like machine learning models have to experience the wrong things too so
Mm-hmm.
that they can know like, okay, no, that's wrong.
It's funny because I had a similar thing happen. My son was wanting to make pancakes, and we have it's kind of like a mix where you just add milk and you can add an egg if you want, and you mix it up, and he knows what temperature. He's like 7 at the time. He's 8 now. You know what? He knows what
Yeah.
temperature to put the griddle on. I was gonna get in the shower, and I was like, he'd see me do this, and I was like, all right, this is what you need to grab: cup of this, a cup of that. And then I was like nervous, and I was like, he's gonna make a mess. I know he's just gonna spill it everywhere. And I was like, yeah, but like if I waited till he didn't make a mess to make pancakes, like I coddled him so much he'd never made a mess, then like
Yeah.
I did him a great disservice, right? He did make a mess, but I had to remind myself, like, okay, what's the worst thing? There's powder on the floor. Maybe
Yeah.
your son or your daughter spills milk on the carpet. It's not the end of the world, but it's like you would be robbing them of a learning opportunity otherwise, right?
Yeah, there are times I love that you did that. There are times where, like, to help reinforce to them that it's okay to make a mistake, I've literally like taken stuff and just dumped it on the floor. Like,
That's awesome.
I literally like took syrup. I'm like, hey, look, everything's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I just spelled my name on the floor with syrup. I have
Mhm.
to like, we got to clean it up now, but like, it's okay.
Especially with the low stakes stuff, man, because the high stake stuff will come, and if we intervene too much on the low stake stuff, then like they're not gonna be ready for the world, you know. So that's our jobs as
Yeah,
parents, and also as let's say you're also a mentor to someone who's new, coming up, and that they can learn from you. It's the same thing. You can't over coddle them, but you need to be there for them to teach them those lessons at the same time too. But I've just really appreciated your perspective, um, and you've been awesome. And I just wondering, is there anything that you want to like plug? Do you have like a website or something that you post your stuff on, or I don't know? And we could cut this out if you don't. I didn't really ask you ahead of time.
no, it's fine. And we can talk more. Like, I enjoy doing this. Like, to me, it's just fun to talk. My wife says I should get a job just talking. She says you'd be good at that. So, I mean, I have a website that I sometimes post stuff to. I haven't recently. ihascode.com with an S, not have. I has code. But yeah, like, I post stuff on there sometimes. Like, whenever I feel like I learned a lesson, then that's when I'll post something, or I feel like something clicked. Like, that's when I'll write one of those quote unquote epiphanies. I haven't had an epiphany recently, but if I do, I'll post it there. But yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, definitely people could check that out and just I'll just keep kind of following the things you say because I've always just seen them to be wise. So if anybody wants to add to the conversation, if they have thoughts, even if you have questions for Brian, whether it be about software engineering or just taking risks, you can email me at contact@nobettertime.com. Actually, nobettertimepodcast.com. And from there, you can also find me on all the major platforms for podcasts. Also, I post videos. We'll be posting this video of this interview on YouTube, so you can search "No Better Podcast" there, so you'll be able to see Brian's face. But yeah, I just want to get people engaged. So if people have something to say, I want to hear it, and I'll pass it along to Brian if you do have questions for him. Then I'll see if I can get his response. So thanks again, Brian. You have a good one.
yeah, enjoyed it.
Thanks.